All stories in this video were sourced from Reddit. Names and details have been changed to protect privacy. Hey, come in. Sit down. I have been waiting to tell this story for a long time, and I mean that literally. I've been rehearsing it in my head for months. In the shower, on my commute, at 3 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. I'd run through it over and over, trying to figure out how to say it without sounding crazy, without sounding bitter, without sounding like the kind of woman people roll their eyes at. And then, one day, I just thought, why am I still doing that? Why am I still performing for people who aren't even in the room? Still editing myself, still making myself smaller, still worrying about how I come across. That was his thing, not mine. So today, I'm not editing, I'm not performing. I'm just going to tell you what happened. All of it, from the beginning. Because the beginning matters. You can't understand how I ended up here without knowing where it started. I met Daniel when I was 26 years old. I was living in a new city, I had just started a job I actually liked for the first time in my life, and I was genuinely happy, like independently happy, not waiting for something happy, just content in my own life by myself. I want you to remember that version of me because she's important to this story. We met through a dating app, which I know is the least romantic origin story, but here we are. His profile was different from the others. No gym photos, no pictures with fish he'd caught, just him laughing at something off camera, and a bio that said, "I will absolutely judge you for your coffee order, but in a fun way." I swiped right because it made me laugh. That's it. That's how it started. Our first date was 3 hours long. We went for coffee and then just kept walking around the city because neither of us wanted to stop talking. He was smart, genuinely smart, not trying to impress you smart. He asked real questions, he had opinions, he pushed back on things I said in a way that felt like he was actually listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. I came home that night and called my best friend and said, "I think I just met someone." And she said, "Don't do that. Don't fall immediately. You always do that." She was right, by the way, about the falling, not about him. Within 3 months, we were seeing each other every day. Within 6 months, I had a drawer at his place. Within a year, we had signed a lease together. It all happened so naturally, so easily, that it didn't even feel fast. It felt inevitable, like we had just slotted into each other's lives and the space had always been there. His family loved me, my family loved him. My friends thought he was great. He was charming and warm and funny in group settings, remembered everyone's names, always brought something when he came over, always made people feel seen. He was so good at making people feel seen. Looking back, I think that was the skill. That was the thing he'd perfected, making you feel like you were special, like he had chosen you specifically, like you were the one person who really understood him and who he really understood. It created this bubble, this us against the world feeling that I was absolutely addicted to. We got engaged after 3 years. He proposed on a random Tuesday night in our apartment. No big gesture, just got down on one knee in the kitchen while I was making dinner and said he didn't want to wait for a special occasion because every day with him already felt like one. I cried so hard I couldn't even say yes for like 30 seconds. I just stood there, ugly crying, while he held the ring. I was so in love with him. I need you to understand that. This is not a story about a woman who ignored obvious red flags and stayed out of stupidity or weakness. I loved this man with my whole heart. I trusted him completely, and he used that trust as a tool. The first sign, and I mean the very first sign that made something in me go quiet and still, happened about 4 months after we got married. We were at a dinner party at our friend's house. Lovely evening, lots of people, wine, good food. At some point during dinner, I told a story. Just a funny story about something that had happened at work that week. Everyone laughed. It was a good story. I told it well. On the drive home, Daniel was quiet. I asked him what was wrong. He said nothing. I asked again. He sighed and said, "It's just, do you always have to make everything about you?" I remember the feeling of those words landing, like a small cold stone dropping into still water. I said, "What do you mean? I told one story." He said, "You dominated the whole dinner. Every topic, you had something to say. It's exhausting to watch." And I sat there in silence for the rest of the drive because I genuinely didn't know what to say. Because in my memory, I had told one story, one, and other people had talked plenty. But he was saying it with such certainty, such quiet disappointment, that I immediately started doubting myself. Maybe I had talked too much and not noticed. Maybe I'm one of those people who doesn't realize how much space they take up. When we got home, I apologized. I said I was sorry if I'd made him feel embarrassed. He accepted the apology like I'd done something wrong. That should have been the moment, that right there. But it wasn't, because it was so small, so subtle, and because he was warm immediately after, kissed me on the forehead, made us tea, put on a show we both liked, and I thought, okay, he had a bad evening. Everyone has bad evenings. This is what real relationships look like. You don't always agree, you work through things. I worked through things. He just waited for the next opportunity. The comments became a pattern, always low level, always with this gentle disappointment tone, rather than anger. Never a fight. He hated fighting, he'd always made that clear. I don't do drama, he used to say. At first, I thought that was a green flag. You looked tired tonight. You should probably ease up on the wine. I'm not saying it looks bad. I just think you looked better before you cut your hair. That's a bit of an intense reaction, don't you think? You've been so up and down lately. Is everything okay with you? That last one. That one he used constantly, framed as concern. Is everything okay with you? Said in this careful, measured voice whenever I expressed any emotion he didn't want to deal with. Sadness, frustration, even excitement that was too loud for his taste. You seem really heightened right now. Is everything okay with you? Over time, and I'm talking like a year and a half of this, I started internalizing it. I started monitoring myself. Is this reaction proportionate? Am I being too much right now? I would have a completely normal emotional response to something and then immediately audit it, check it against some imaginary standard of acceptable feeling. I stopped telling him when things upset me because I was so tired of being told my feelings were too big. I stopped sharing good news enthusiastically because I didn't want to seem like I was dominating conversations. I stopped wearing certain things because of offhand comments he'd made. I stopped seeing certain friends as often because he'd made subtle remarks about them that made me feel vaguely embarrassed to be associated with them. I made myself smaller and smaller and smaller, and I thought it was personal growth. I genuinely thought I was becoming a more self-aware, emotionally mature person because that's how he framed it. His gentle, caring, deeply manipulative line. The best version of myself, it turned out, was whoever was easiest for him to control. About 2 years into the marriage, the gaslighting moved into a new phase. It wasn't just comments anymore. It was reality. It started with small things, plans he claimed I'd never told him about, conversations he insisted had never happened, promises he flatly denied. I would say, "You said we could visit my parents for Easter." He would say, "I never said that. I said we'd think about it." "No, you said yes. I remember specifically." "You always do this. You hear what you want to hear, and then you convince yourself it's what was said. I'm not going to keep having this conversation." And he'd walk away, calm, certain, done. I started keeping a journal, not a diary, just notes, a record, because I needed something external to confirm that my memory was functional. I'd write down what was said after important conversations. I'd screenshot texts. I built this little private archive of reality because I could no longer fully trust my own perception. Do you understand how frightening that is, to need evidence that you are insane? I was 30 years old, in my own home, secretly documenting my life because my husband had systematically dismantled my confidence in my own perception. And still, I didn't leave, because every time I got close to naming what was happening, close to saying this isn't right, he would do something lovely, plan a weekend trip, cook an elaborate dinner, say something so tender and specific about loving me that I would dissolve. He was so good at the repair. The repair was almost worth the damage. Almost. The cheating. Okay, here is the thing about finding out your husband is cheating. In my case, it wasn't a surprise. It was a I noticed all of it, and I said nothing. Because by that point, I had been so thoroughly trained to distrust my own instincts that I genuinely thought, you are being paranoid. You are being insecure. You are doing the thing he always says you do, looking for problems that aren't there. So I watched, and I said nothing, and I waited to be proven wrong. There was a woman, I'll call her Claire, who worked in his industry. I had heard her name before, casually, the way you hear any colleague's name. She'd come up in conversation maybe twice, nothing notable. And then she started coming up more, in small ways, but more. Claire had this idea in the meeting today. Claire recommended this restaurant. Apparently it's great. I ran into Claire at that conference. We grabbed a drink afterward. I noticed it the way you notice a song that keeps playing. You don't consciously register it at first, then one day you realize you've been hearing it for weeks. I didn't say anything for a long time. When I finally did, I kept it light. I said, "You mention Claire a lot. Is she a good friend?" And he looked at me with this expression, this patient, weary expression. And he said, "Please don't do this. She's a colleague. This is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say you have trust issues." Trust issues. There it was, my concern, immediately repackaged as my pathology. I backed off.
I apologized, actually, for noticing something real. The night I found out, I wasn't even looking. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't going through his phone or following him or doing anything I would have been ashamed of. I was doing laundry. He was traveling for work, or so I believed, and I was doing laundry, and I picked up his gym bag to check if there was anything in it. And there was his iPad. He'd forgotten it. I picked it up to set it aside, and the screen lit up because I'd moved it, and there was a message thread, right there on the screen. I didn't have to unlock anything. I didn't have to look for it. It was just there. I read 3 lines. That was all I needed. I sat on the bathroom floor for a very long time after that, not crying, just sitting. There was this strange stillness in my body, like everything had stopped, like my nervous system had just quietly powered down to do some kind of emergency processing. And then, slowly, something else came in. Not sadness, something harder than sadness. I thought about every time he had told me I was paranoid, every time I'd apologized for noticing something real, every argument I lost because he'd been so certain and I'd been so conditioned to doubt myself. Every version of reality he'd handed me and I had accepted because I trusted him more than I trusted my own eyes. I thought about all of that, and I got up off the bathroom floor and I took photographs of the screen and I sent them to my email address. And then I put the iPad back exactly where I'd found it, because I had learned from him. Document everything. He came home 2 days later. I had spent those 2 days doing 2 things: talking to a lawyer and deciding exactly how I wanted this conversation to go. I did not want to cry. I did not want to scream. I did not want to give him anything he could use against me, no emotion he could pathologize, no behavior he could reframe as the real problem. When he walked in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea like it was any other evening. He came in cheerful, dropped his bag, started talking about his trip. I let him talk. I waited until he sat down. Then I put my phone on the table in front of him, the photographs. He went very still. He tried to his credit, or discredit, I suppose, several things in quick succession. He said it was out of context. He said it wasn't what it looked like. He said I shouldn't have gone through his things. I said, I found your iPad doing laundry. The screen was on, but go ahead. He switched tactics. Said it was complicated. Said things had been difficult between us for a long time. Said I had felt disconnected from you. Said I was never fully present. Said I had trust issues that had pushed him away. And here's the thing. Here is the truly breathtaking thing. I had spent 3 years being told my feelings were too big, my perceptions were wrong, my instincts were paranoid. And now, in this moment, he was using exactly that, the very distance and anxiety that he had created, as the reason for what he had done. He had made me smaller, and then blamed me for being small. I looked at him for a long time without saying anything, and then I said, I want you to move out. I'll have the paperwork started by the end of the week. He seemed genuinely surprised. I think he expected tears, begging, negotiation, another opportunity to manage me. I was completely calm. It wasn't the calm of someone who wasn't hurting. It was the calm of someone who had already done all her falling apart in private and was now just completing a task. He said, Can we please talk about this? I said, We just did. He left that night. He took some things and said he'd get the rest later. Standing at the door with his bag, he tried one more time. He said, I still love you. I want you to know that. And I thought about 26-year-old me, independently happy in a city by herself, who had swiped right on a man with a funny bio and thought she'd found something real. I said, I know you think you do. And I closed the door. That was 7 months ago. I'm not going to pretend the last 7 months have been easy. They haven't. There were nights, a lot of nights, where I cried until I felt hollow. There were mornings where getting out of bed felt like moving concrete. There were moments where I missed him with a specific physical ache that I cannot fully describe to you. Not him as he actually was, the him I believed in. Grief is strange when the person is still alive. You're not mourning a death. You're mourning a version of someone that may have never existed. I've been in therapy. My therapist is wonderful, and she has helped me understand something that I think is important and that I want to say clearly. What happened to me was not my fault, not because I was helpless, not because I had no agency, but because I trusted someone who had specifically worked to earn that trust in order to exploit it. That is not a character flaw in me. That is a calculated choice he made. For a long time, I kept asking myself, how did I not see it? How did I let it go on so long? And the answer, which I took a while to accept, is that I did see it. I saw it constantly. I saw every flicker of something wrong, every moment that didn't add up, every feeling that told me something was off. I just didn't trust what I saw because he had taught me not to. I'm doing better now. Not fixed. I don't think healed is a destination you arrive at. I think it's something you're always moving toward, but better. I moved into a smaller apartment and I decorated it exactly how I wanted, and there was no one to make a quiet, measured comment about my choices. I painted one wall a color I love that he would call a lot. I bought a loud patterned duvet. I have plants everywhere. It looks like me. It feels like me. I've been spending more time with my friends, who it turns out had been gently worried about me for a couple of years. That was hard to hear, but it was also good to hear. To know that the people who loved me had seen something, even when I couldn't. I've started doing things I used to love and had quietly stopped doing. I write again. I used to write a lot, and I just stopped. He never said anything directly negative about it, but he had this way of being uninterested that made me feel self-indulgent for doing it. I'm writing again. It feels like getting a part of myself back that I didn't realize I'd lost. I'm also learning to trust my instincts again. That one is the slowest. When you've spent years being told your perception is wrong, it doesn't just snap back, but it's coming. I'll have a feeling about something, and instead of immediately questioning it, I'll pause and think, this feeling is information. It might be right. It deserves to be taken seriously. I deserve to be taken seriously. Okay, I'm almost done. I want to say something to you, specifically to you if any of this has felt familiar. Not the exact story, the feeling. That particular kind of quiet confusion where you know something is wrong, but you can't quite name it. Where you find yourself apologizing for emotions you were completely justified in having. Where you have become so good at seeing things from their perspective that you've completely lost access to your own. If that sounds like your life, I want to say this clearly. You are not too sensitive. You are not too much. You are not paranoid or dramatic or difficult. Those are not true facts about you. Those are things someone told you, repeatedly, strategically, because it served them to keep you doubting yourself. Your instincts are not broken. They have been working this whole time. They have been sending you signals, and you have been overriding them because someone you trusted told you not to listen. Listen to them. You are allowed to trust what you see. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have feelings that are inconvenient for other people. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to be angry about what happened to you without having to balance it immediately with, but I also made mistakes, or it wasn't all bad, or I'm sure he didn't mean it that way. Maybe he didn't. It still happened. You do not have to earn the right to your own story. That's everything. That's the whole thing. I didn't edit it. I didn't make myself sound better than I was. I didn't soften any of it. It happened. I got through it. I'm still getting through it. If you're in the middle of it right now, I promise you there's a bathroom moment coming, a moment where it all becomes undeniably clear, and it will hurt badly in ways you won't be fully prepared for. But on the other side of that moment is a door, and you get to choose whether to close it. I closed mine. I'll see you next time.